Joining us now on the show is Cassandra Ulbrich. She is the president of the State Board of Education. Boy, what a year, right? Like the past 10 months, what a year.
It really has been. I don't think anyone could have, in their wildest dreams, imagined, just back in March, thinking about it, we were going home for 3 weeks. And here we are 10 months later, and we are still in somewhat of an educational limbo, just trying to make sure that people are safe and healthy, and still, kids are still getting some learning opportunities at the same time.
And so Friday, the governor did announce that she is trying to encourage all school districts to start offering some type of in-person learning by March 1st. What does that mean, and what are your thoughts on that?
So I think it's a little bit of a misnomer. I think people are assuming that most students are not getting any in-person learning, and I don't think that's quite accurate. So a couple months ago, MSU actually did a study after the schools came out with their return to learn programs, and found that about 86% of the districts in the state of Michigan were actually offering some form of in-person learning. Now, it wasn't full-time for everybody, but there were in-person learning opportunities for students. And of course, those have changed periodically depending on what happens at the local level. But I think some students are getting in-person instruction. I think the governor's point is that she is trying to get us more students having the option of an in-person learning opportunity, and with the idea that this would happen by March 1st. But the reality is sooner if possible. And we're already seeing some districts that are going back to in-person learning that may not have been at this point. So that's a good thing. But of course, it comes with recommendations and guidance as well. So one of obviously the things that we've all heard about are continuing with the hand washing, the physical distancing, the mask wearing. But some of the other guidance includes things like cohorting students, so that students aren't mixing throughout the day in large numbers, but are rather maybe staying in one classroom. And maybe the teachers are the ones that are going from classroom to classroom, so that there's less intermixing of students throughout the day. And also a recommendation is to have a designated COVID-19 point of contact at the school, so that if anyone does have questions or concerns or wants to report, a potential exposure, they have a one-stop shop basically to go and to do that. So those are the things that are recommended for schools. There's also a testing program and a voluntary program to offer weekly testing to educators in public schools as well. And starting today, teachers and staff are eligible to receive the vaccine through the state of Michigan. So the state should be working with the school districts, and then the school districts will communicate to their teachers and their staff on when they can get that vaccine and how that will happen.
And so when you mention that, though, how is that process actually working to get the vaccines down to the members of these school districts? Because I will say, it's great to hear it come from the governor's mouth, and then even your mouth, for, being with the State Board of Education, but then the realities of actually getting it on the local level. There always tends to be a breakdown. So what is that process? Is it coordinated through your local health department, or is it coordinated through the state of Michigan? Because we had a superintendent on last week, Friday, who said, they got no notice. So what is the planning process? It's great to say, hey, this is available, but what is the process to actually get it implemented?
So that's a great question. Today is the first day. So I think that process is probably still in process, if you will, of happening. My understanding is that it is supposed to flow down from the state to the local health departments, and then they work with the districts to make that happen. Now, we know what we've seen so far is that while we have vaccines, they haven't necessarily been getting into arms as quickly as we would like that to happen. So you're right. There is probably going to be a lag time in the process to make that happen. But the good news is that teachers and staff are now eligible for that. Before it was an age limit. That is not the case anymore. So they are considered frontline essential workers, and they are now eligible to be able to get the vaccine. But the process is going to take a little bit of work.
Well, there's a lot of work. And what is the, when it comes to getting the vaccine, is it still on a volunteer basis?
My apologies. I have a dog.
That's okay. I do too. And she's chewing a bone in front of me, and we hope that she stays quiet for a little bit.
There seems to be a squirrel outside. So I'm sorry, repeat your question one time.
No, they're like, we want the squirrel, let us out to play. Oh my, it's so cute though, I will say that. But this is, that's how Zoom calls are going, right? To me, they add like more reality. It's the reality of life right now and how we live. But is it still, when it comes to the vaccine, at this point, is the recommendation from the State Board of Education still that it's on a volunteer basis?
Correct. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So is there a possibility that we will say, like, I know that you're kind of moving here in the process because of your dog, but that is okay. That is the beauty of everyone working from home and working remotely. This is the reality of what we're going through with that. So with us here on the Oakland County MegaCast, we're going to try to give you a little bit of time to switch your location. Cassandra Ulbrich, she is the president for the State Board of Education here in the state of Michigan. And so we are talking a little bit about the state of Michigan today, starting today, our new vaccine eligibility, which is extended to some of those lawmakers. And with that, if we can ask you, so it's going to be on a volunteer basis. What about come April, May, June? Is there a possibility that teachers and also other members that are working within a school building are going to be required to have the vaccine? Is that discussion even bubbling up, or at this point in time, you're still in the beginning stages of let's get those that want to be vaccinated?
I have not heard any conversations like that, but I'm not sure that I necessarily would. I think that's more of a MDHHS and governor's office conversation. And I don't think that the State Board of Education at this point would be involved in a conversation like that. But I can tell you, I have not heard anything like that.
So with this, we're still 10 months into this and we're still in the middle of the crisis. Can we talk about money? I know that Michigan is scheduled to get 1.7, I think, $1 million more from the COVID school aid federal fund. How is the state doing when it comes to the finances? Because we do know there are a lot of students that have left the public school forum altogether during this crisis.
Yeah, and we're not entirely sure what that number is. That you can look at the numbers that are in school today versus that were in school last year, and it's about 53,000 less. But the reality is every single year we have a loss of students just by attrition alone. And so that factors into that number. And then you also have a lot of parents who are just deciding to, their kids might be eligible for kindergarten, but they're like, well, we might as well just take an extra year at home. So that's a natural occurrence as well. So I would say all in all, we probably have about 13,000 students that we really don't know if they are being homeschooled, if they've left the state. And that's a real concern for us. So that's the enrollment piece. The financial piece, I would say, fortunately, Congress did pass an additional relief package in December, and Michigan schools will receive additional funding allocated mostly through Title I formula funding. And this is meant to stabilize their funding. And it will be considerably more than what we received last year through the CARES Act. So it's about 4 times more than what they had received before. We're also getting additional funding for childcare and early childhood education, as well as broadband. So these are all good things, but the one thing to keep in mind is they are one-time funds. So as schools are utilizing them, they have to keep in mind the sustainability piece because it's not like you can hire a bunch of new teachers, because eventually these funds are going to run out and they will most likely not be renewed again at that point. So, but we are very fortunate that the federal government did step up and did provide additional relief. And that will certainly be a tremendous help to our local schools.
Funding is always important. And if we can kind of go back just a little bit to the number that you just stated, 13,000 students, you're not sure where they are. If you're just a regular person, that sounds like astounding. And you wonder how many kids are maybe slipping through the cracks during this coronavirus crisis.
It is a concern, but we live in a state that doesn't require parents to inform anybody when they decide to homeschool their students. And that's part of the problem. If they want additional services for their kids, then they do notify the local district. And we've had, I want to say, roughly 17,000 that have said, you know what, I'm going to homeschool my student, but I still want them to have access to these services. And that's great. I mean, we certainly encourage that. It's good for the parents, it's good for the state, because we know that these kids haven't fallen through the cracks. But yes, those that have not notified their local school district, that becomes a real concern, because it is possible that students could be falling through the cracks and we just don't know it. It's likely that many of them probably are being homeschooled and their parents have just chosen not to inform anybody of that. But the reality is we don't know. And there's no mechanism in the state to really know, because it's the parents' right not to tell anybody what they're doing.
So I wonder too, is that going to be something that maybe changes coming out of this? Once we get through the crisis, I think that's when we'll really start to continue to peel back the layers of this onion and discover some of these individuals and these kids that have fallen victim to the coronavirus crisis, that maybe there's going to be some positive changes. Because I just can't imagine, like, you don't, and you also wonder about the low income kids. I feel like they're the most impacted by some of these things that are happening right now.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's why, you know, when it came to prioritizing in-person instruction, you know, our recommendation was you take a look at the students that are most impacted by a strictly remote education, and then you prioritize getting them back into the classroom. But as far as your question about registering homeschool, that would require the legislature to change the law. And quite frankly, there is a large contingency of people who don't want that to happen. And yeah, and they're a big lobby, and they're a powerful lobby. And so, you know, there's been calls in the past for this to happen, but there's a lot of pushback to that. And so to answer your question, I don't know if the law will change.
So you wonder, why is it so hard? Like, if I'm going to homeschool my kids, shouldn't they be held accountable just like some of the school districts and some of our educators as well? I'm not a teacher. Like, I couldn't imagine trying to homeschool my child.
I can only tell you what I have heard from other people, and what I tend to hear is it's my right, and the government has no business telling me one way or the other. And that seems to be the biggest argument against requiring anything like this. But I will tell you that other states do require it. You know, there are, and some states even require, if you're going to homeschool your kids, that someone in the home have some form of teaching certificate or something along those lines. We have none of those requirements in Michigan. But at a minimum, I think a registration might be a good idea. But there are a lot of people out there who are very that don't want the government in their business, which, you know, to a certain extent, I can certainly understand. But on the other hand, it does open up the possibility for really bad things to happen.
Oh, and there are so many stories as a reporter for 20 plus years here in this area. Some of the stories that are heartbreaking, and including the one where the mother killed her children in Detroit, her daughter, and kept her in a freezer. And everyone was like, how is this happening? Where were the relatives? Where were her teachers?
Right.
And, you know, in some of these are the nuances that the general public, I don't think, realizes is out there. And you have to follow the law, and that's the way the law does
Mm-hmm.
operate. And Dr. Cassandra Ulbrich with us here on the Oakland County MegaCast. She is the president for the State Board of Education. Anything positive do you think is going to come out of this crisis? For me, sitting on the sidelines, because I don't have kids, I do think the inequity and the disparity between the online learning is going to be
Mm-hmm.
a positive, because the kids now, maybe at the beginning of every school year, along with your school books, you get a computer, but it's not so much you have a computer, you need access to the internet as well. And I hope that's one of the things that comes out of this.
I think there's a number of positives that will come out of this. So, for example, with the federal funding that comes, 90% of it is flowed to the local districts through formula funding, but 10% can be held back. And so, with the CARES Act, we held back 10%. We created an equity fund, and this was a fund that local districts could apply to help with those disparities. Is it connectivity? Is it computers? We also, as part of that, created a fund for children's mental health, so that if schools wanted to create a mental health program, that they would have the funding to be able to do that. And so with this next round, it's the same thing. We can hold back 10% and we can create a fund that helps alleviate some of this disparities between schools. So that's one good thing that can come out of this. Another is, I think, an overall appreciation for public education. For many, many years, it was kind of the whipping boy, if you will, for every ailment that was going on in society. And I think people are now realizing that public school really is a vital component of the community, and that teachers have a really hard but important job that not everybody can do. And so I think that there's going to be a new appreciation when we get back to our quote unquote new normal, that public education is really important. And we need to make sure that the laws and the policies that we create in the state of Michigan are protecting our public schools and not dismantling them, which is the direction we were headed before this pandemic came to be a part of our lives.
A couple questions here before we let you go. The announcement by Betsy DeVos that she was stepping down.
Good. I'm happy. I don't think it was an act of courage, to be honest, but I think that she went into that position with a personal agenda.
If we can, we lost your mic for just a second. So there you go. If you can. That's okay. It happens to me too, just so you know. There you go. You're back.
Falling out.
Yeah, it's happened to me. Trust me. So with that, we were talking about Betsy DeVos. You're not sad to see her step down from her position.
I am not. I think it is time for new leadership in the Department of Education. And I'm really excited to see someone come in as the Secretary of Education who is a component of public education and believes in public education and is not there with a personal agenda to dismantle it, but actually to make it better and to make improvements.
And with that, what do you think the overall change is going to be, or attraction to get new people, or new teachers into the system? Are they going to step away from wanting to go into education, or is the possibility of remote learning going to attract more people into the industry?
Well, we have seen a decline over the years, which is not, it's not good. And we have certain critical shortage areas in teaching. It used to be math and science and special education, but now it's getting to the point where it's even early, elementary school teachers that we need. And so I think that, hopefully there will be a new push, particularly if we get back to the point where we are celebrating our teachers and not blaming them all the time, that people will want to go into this profession.
I will say, from what I could tell from social media, from my friends that have kids and who are now trying to help them remote learn, there is going to be a bigger and much broader appreciation for teachers and everything that they do every single day.
I think that is correct. And I think it's time that we have that again. And I'm really excited to see that new direction for education.
Although I think there might be a kind of a rebellion and a big push to try to bring back old math because fifth grade math is not what it used to be, and cursive writing.
Yes. Yes. So there's a lot of new ways that we teach things, which are they're not bad. It's just a different way of teaching. But I understand that for parents, it would be nice to get back to the old ways of doing things.
Hey, if we had to learn cursive writing, they should too. With that, Dr. Ulbrich, before we let you go, anything maybe we didn't touch on that you want to share with our listeners and our viewers before we let you go?
I would just say, I would be remiss if I didn't mention what happened last week in the U.S. Capitol and the impact that that could have on kids. I think that it was awful to see. It was frightening for adults, so of course it would be for kids as well. But it's also a learning opportunity. And so I'm sure that there are a number of tough conversations that are taking place in classrooms across the country. And I think it's really important that those conversations happen, that students have a space where they can process and ask questions and express their thoughts and fears and anger. And I really appreciate and I applaud the teachers who are allowing that to happen.
Very much so, because it is a hard conversation, but an important one for them to have with their students as well. But on the other side of that, we have all grown up with these moments in our lives, the Challenger explosion, 9/11, and I think what we witnessed last week in DC is going to be that for our students today as well.
That
Well, thank you so much. Dr. Cassandra Ulbrich with us. She's the president for the State Board of Education. Great to have you with us, and we appreciate your time. And
Thank you.
we're all pet parents here as well. So say hi to your dogs, and they're like, take us out. We want to go chase the squirrel.
That's right. Thank you so much.